Hello, and welcome to Endgame Tricks in Chess. So, a mate of mine texted me and told me that he's had a bit of trouble with closed endgames. He was pretty competent with openings and middle games, but it was just his finishing of the game, the conversion, which is absolutely fair. Even I have problems with this. So, I thought I'd show maybe a couple of puzzles, and with that, show some of the methods on how to win some of these closed endgames. So, this is the first puzzle. You're white, and our first goal is to identify our goal. Usually in endgames, or in just puzzles in general, we have two main goals. One is to win some of the material, and the other is to checkmate. So, with this G file open, I think we can identify that our goal is to checkmate. Second, we have to figure out what's going on with our pieces, like what's the relationship between them. So, our knight is currently under attack, but also this isn't just pieces we're talking about, it's squares, because it's pieces and squares, that's two parts of the game. With these squares, we identify that the queen is defending f8 and the knight's defending f7. This is already useful information because it's pretty obvious what our first move is going to be if we're going to go for this king. Our first step is to bring in more pieces, and that's why we would play rook g1. You're forced to go king h8, and obviously this is where the queen and knight come in. You're not allowed to go here. So now we hit a roadblock. How do we push through? This is where our first method on how to win close endgames comes through. We have to create new threats. So what's our existing threat? Well, knight f7 checkmate. Pretty straightforward, but this queen's stopping it. So how do we get past this? This is a part where you might want to pause and maybe think about it. So if you still haven't figured it out, that's fine. The way to solve these types of puzzles, it's mainly just trial and error, where you take a lot of time to think, what are some of these candidate moves? Candidate moves meaning possible moves that you might play. So because our knight is under attack, we have to play pretty forcing. It has to be either a check or a threat for a checkmate. This means that we have to examine all moves. Perhaps, for all we know, rook g8 might be the move. Obviously it's not in this case, but we still have to think about some of this stuff. So after a lot of trial and error, I did this puzzle and I found queen d6. So with this move, obviously our first threat is to go queen f6, checkmate. But other than that, it's also attacking this queen. Now we have two threats, queen takes f6 and knight f7. With this, we realize the queen can't take, obviously, because then it loses its connection of f7, and we checkmate. So we have two threats now, and now they have to obviously defend f6 with something like rook f8 possibly, but now this queen drops. So we realize that by creating a second threat, and because of how poorly placed these pieces are, it's way too much for black, and they collapse. So first method is to create new threats. So this puzzle that you see is actually a position that I ended up playing in one of my games online. This was a while back, and it was 10 minutes each. We had played quite a lot of moves, so we were both pretty low on time. So if you're questioning my intelligence, now you know. Now, I know this is closed endgames, but when I searched some closed positional endgames to showcase some of the methods, funnily enough, I couldn't find any. So I just took some of the ones that I got when I was playing my games, and hopefully this will be an accurate enough representation. So anyways, here we go. First thing that we want to do is evaluate the position, right? So even material all around, but we can see king safety. I guess it doesn't matter as much, but piece mobility, I think, and pawn structure. So here we go. With the pawn structure, all of them look pretty safe, except for this pawn, which is isolated, and this pawn is a beast. Why? Well, because it's just attacking g3, and this king can't go there, so it's pretty much hindering this king. Now with the piece mobility, both of these rooks are pretty active. They can attack a good amount of pieces and all that, but the real difference comes with the kings. This king can attack a pawn in just two moves, whilst this king takes a very long time. Now, we could say that black is winning because of this, and that would be a fair statement, but I actually looked at this from the engine, and it's even. But the way I won this was pretty interesting. So I played rook f3, you know, a simple move. I just wanted to attack the only free piece. He went back, and now I go rook f4. So the method that I'm using is piece maneuvering, right, which is pretty vague in of itself, but the hidden meaning behind this is trying to save as many moves as possible whenever you play. And this should go all around, but in endgames it's most prominent because it's all about the conservation. So here, I attacked h4 and he attacked my rook while defending h4. So I attack this pawn, and at this point he goes rook d2, attacking a2. So I take here, trying to keep this isolated pawn, and also trying to possibly go for h4 instead of f7. So he takes here, and I go rook f5. He goes rook e2 to attack my pawn on e5, so I take, and he takes, and I go here. Now, let's try and think about this in terms of like point A and point B. If we go all the way back, this was our position before, and it seemed pretty even. Now here, although the computer might say it's, you know, even as well, it looks so much better for white. We can say that pretty clearly. This h4 pawn is going to be dropping pretty soon, and you know, you can say rook h5 is good, but what we've done now is we've tied this rook down to this pawn, and if we lose that pawn, then all of a sudden we have two connected passed pawns, which is like a nightmare to deal with. So what my opponent did was he tried to keep the pawn balance even by going for my pawn on b3. I went b4, trying to stop him, and when he went rook b3, I went c5. So I'm defending this pawn on b4 while attacking this pawn on h4. The difference is that he's attacking my pawn on b4, but he is in no way defending his pawn on h4. Because of this, I'm going to be up a pawn soon, and there's no way he can stop my connected passed pawns. So we were both very low on time, and at this point, he ended up resigning. So our first method was creating new tactics. This was showcased when we were going for checkmate, but this also happens when just winning material. Our second method was piece maneuvering, or just our conservation in moves. This was showcased through a rook endgame, which was actually even, but we were able to squeak out a win. Anyways, that's closed endgames, and thank you.